There we go. Okay, welcome everybody to Unschooling 101. I hope today is informative. Very much it tends to be learner centered. So if you have questions, feel free to write them in the chat box and I can point to a slide and speak to it a bit more. Maybe you're here today because you're new to homeschooling. Unschooling is kind of a method of delivery of homeschooling, and I'm going to talk about general unschooling, general homeschooling. But if you want province specific information, you're best to go to your individual province's website on home education. That's probably the best where you can find out. Unschooling is accepted all across Canada as a method of homeschooling, except in Quebec, just because in Quebec, parents have to follow the government curriculum. And for them to do that, you can't really, it's very difficult to go child led, child directed when you have to follow somebody else's agenda. It's very difficult to unschool at that point. So that's a key component of unschooling is not having to follow government curriculum for sure. Okay. So moving on. So this is me. Whoops. Nope, that's not me. This is me. I'm Judy. I my life's work, what I get paid to to work is in teaching about child development and non-punitive parenting and education practices. So I have taught for 13 years with Alberta Health Services, and I've taught for 13 years at the University of Calgary for continuing education. Um, I'm very interested in brain development. I have studied brains, and it's very helpful to take that information and put it against the education world because I think the education world definitely needs more in services on what we know on how brains develop and knowledge there. Okay, and this is so I said I'm non-punitive parenting, and yeah, that's me. I've written quite a few books on non-punitive parenting. And then when my kids started going to school, I had a real issue with um, the punitive aspect of learning and how they would punish kids if they didn't read their books and they didn't get pizza coupons at school, or how they punish kids whose body just couldn't enable them to sit still and pay attention, which what we know is that's a factor of the prefrontal cortex brain development. That is not the child choosing to be willingly um, difficult. So those things I really did have a problem with, and probably one of the reasons why I took my kids out of school. I also wrote a book on non-punitive education. If you haven't heard of the book, it's called Unschooling to University. It's 384 pages on basically telling parents that your child doesn't need formal education till high school. That's it. 384 pages. Um, but and even then, if they're not going for post-secondary, they don't need it at high school either. So, um, but it's a good book. It's available free if you could e-transfer me the postage. But I wrote it because my kids, my oldest three kids, were going to university after unschooling for most of their educational life. And all their friends were going too. And when 30 kids go off to university and have spent most of their childhood playing, that's information that needs to get out there to the masses. I also, in there, you'll read how those kids got into university, what they took. We had about 10 go into arts, 10 go into humanities, and 10 go into STEM careers. We even had 4 engineers in the bunch. I started the Unschooling Canada Association just to help parents find information, advocate for parents, and have a voice when legislation is allowing parents to have a voice. If you need more information, follow our blog. It's more up to date. of what we're up to lately. We are, for example, we're world schooling this year. We're going to 6 countries in the next 5 months. And yeah, our adventures are going on there. So if you're new to unschooling, you have questions, don't worry. Feel free, ask away. We want to give you what you want to know. I mean, I have a whole bunch of slides here, but I'm interested in giving you what you want. Okay. And these are common topics in my book, but we're not going to cover all that. So let's jump ahead, and I'm going to jump ahead to slides too. I'm going to just pick and choose today. So, kids, they're born learning. Their brains are 100 billion brain cells connecting, talking with each other, making connections. Children are learning machines. And what happens when they get to school? When do they lose that curiosity, that passion, that creativity that they are so engaged in as babies, toddlers, and preschoolers? Well, somewhere between age 5 and 15, they lose their love of learning. And they don't really lose their love of learning. I'm just going to say this now, kids learn forever. During COVID, kids kept on learning. Maybe they didn't learn what the government wanted them to learn, so the government calls it learning losses, but really it should be called government agenda losses, not learning, because kids kept on learning. Their brains grew, strengthened, matured, advanced, and they probably learned a lot of things that they would never have learned if they had been stuck in the government curriculum. In Alberta, our high school completion rate in 5 years is 80%. So 1 out of every 5 brains doesn't complete high school, which kind of tells me there's something wrong with that system. So kids keep on learning. This is the same dude. This is him at age 18 months learning all about Cookie Monster, and this is him at age 18 learning about how to build a gaming computer. And all of these things were initiated on his own terms. He wanted to learn about it. Nobody forced it on him. So if you leave kids to their own devices, they will learn everything they need to learn when they need to learn it. And basically, that's unschooling in a nutshell. So it's learners, children decide what to learn, when to learn it, where to learn it, how to learn it, and if they want to learn it. Now, if they want to learn it, that's the big problem that society has, because they think, well, what if they never learn calculus? Well, if they need it, they learn it. It's very, very simple. Kids are good at learning what they need. So this is kind of an example of what unschooling is. So everybody actually unschools from 0 to age 5. They're curious, they learn something. When your 2-year-old goes to the fridge and pulls out eggs and watches them drop from 3 feet high, they're learning science and velocity and consequences. Great teachers. All children are very good scientists. And they learn it through their play and their curiosity. And then at age 6, we say, okay, you know what? You have to learn what the government wants you to learn. So you have to go to this institution called school and learn what they are going to teach you. So they kind of get taken off the play track because school takes up a lot of their time in the day. You know, when they get up at 7 and go to bed at 7, school takes a good chunk of time. So they're left with very little time to keep on playing and learn what they want to really learn. Except for unschooling. Unschoolers just keep on playing. Play, all through childhood, right? And then what's interesting I've noticed is that when unschoolers want to go on and specialize, maybe in colleges, universities, trade schools, tech schools, or go on to open their own businesses, Then they might replicate some formal learning like school does to get to where they want to go. And at this age, their brains are ready, their brains are motivated, and that's the key. Motivation has to come from the learner. It has to. They own the choice to learn. It cannot be imposed on them. And when it is imposed on them, those kids either tune out, act out, and eventually, when they're old enough, they drop out. So we are just handing over control of what to learn to those kids a little earlier than we would at age 18. They're getting it sooner, and that's a good thing. And we also know between the ages of 13 and 25 is the final developmental lead in the prefrontal cortex. That's the front part of the brain that determines risk taking, decision making, critical thinking, and the big one, self control. So it starts at 13, and then you can see here about 17, it really kicks in that final development. And me and my friends have noticed that our kids at about age 17 really start thinking about what they want to do with their lives, what they want to do for work, for supporting themselves, and they're much more motivated to settle down and learn a bit more formal studies in order to get to their goals. And it's replicated in science. This is from the Brain Story from Alberta Wellness Initiative. Okay, so let's see what I want to talk about. Okay, so unschooling is knowledge acquired on a need to know time frame determined by the learner. It's very child centered. Child decides when they're going to learn. What if the child wants to go to school? Well, they're still unschooling because they have made the choice to do a more formal program. They also have the choice to pull out if it's not what they wanted. So, very much so. In the homeschooling world, this is called unschooling. In the education world, this is called self directed education. But I want to reiterate, be aware that self-directed schools, if they have to follow the government curriculum, and many of them do in order to get funding, the motivation is not unschooling. Okay, those children do not get to decide the if they want to learn that. They have to decide that they have to learn it. So it's not really self-directed, it's self-paced. Maybe the child can choose how they learn, they can't choose what to learn. And therefore, it's not unschooling and it's not self-directed education. Now, teachers are fantastic. We love teachers. They are doing extraordinary amounts of labor under very constrained situations. But many people, it's the system that's the problem. It was a system for us. I loved our teachers. I would just give them a tip if I could. But the system and how it's set up to educate mass numbers of kids loses the personalization and loses treating children like individuals in that system. So, like I said, I am a master non-punitive parenting. I've written books on discipline and parent anger and frustration and how to raise kids without punishment. And that's my thing. I raised 5 children without punishment. I have not taken my teenagers' phones away, taken their door off their room, and they've grown up to be pretty decent people, I think. And like I said, it's very hard to equate that in the education system. So we started off with school. My 2 oldest children went to school, and we had to deal with the institutional quirks that we didn't agree with. And one of my children was very advanced, and one of my children had a learning disability. And what we found is they came home after school and they wanted to learn what they really wanted to learn, such as how to plant an egg. Will it grow an egg tree? And for days, I'm like, oh, wait until you study that in school. And my son nagged me and said, I want to plant an egg. Let's grow an egg tree. Maybe it'll grow Easter eggs. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. So more and more, I found I was after schooling, which is helping the kids learn what they really wanted to learn at that time that it's ready to sink into their brain instead of putting them off because they had already spent 6 hours a day in school. So after a few months of this, I thought, okay, the school's getting the best of their day. I'm pulling them out. We're going to try this homeschooling thing and see if we can do better. I'm sure we can. So we did. We replicated school at home, and that worked for a month. So right now we're in October of this year. Some of you are probably here because your kids have stopped listening to you and they don't want to do the homeschooling work, and they're dawdling and crying and whining, and you're nagging, and maybe you're like me and yelling and threatening them that if they don't do the work, they're going back to school. Teachers can have them. And that was not what I wanted to do. That wasn't my vision of homeschooling. And obviously, it wasn't my kids. My present kid right now, he wrote on his grade 2 math book, I hate mathematics, which thankfully somehow he got back his love of math because he became an engineer. Um, and actually, he didn't even graduate till second year engineering school. So, but if he unschooled mathematics till high school, and then he his brain was working, he got his love of math back. So at this point, we just kind of gave up on curriculum and we slid into unschooling. So we played. This is our art cupboard. Um, and we just played. We did crafts, we did field trips, we traveled a bit, we went camping, we went to a lot of play groups and organized activities, and we had so much fun for 10 years. So 10 years of the older kids' life, we just played. And then they got around to high school and we said, well, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to do a formal high school program? And they're like, yeah, maybe. Let's try it out. So we did try it out. And it worked really, really good. And throughout that, I sat down, had them write their provincial achievement test because I thought, okay, I want to know how you guys rate in relation to everyone else in the province, being that we didn't give you really specific curriculum. And they did really good. They got acceptable levels in science and social studies because those are very topic focused, but they did fine in math and English, and at some points they did excellent. So their first day of school was grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. But when I say we went to high school, we did high school on our terms. So if the kids were very strong in a subject, so for example, my son was very good at math and science, we just went right to the diploma exam and he wrote it, got his credits, got off. If they needed studying for the other kids, they needed to study some of the science topics, social studies, English. And they did that. They did it either through online classes or through self-teaching. So we bought a book on physics. And physics is physics anywhere in the world. Physics is physics. So you can buy any book, learn it yourself, and then write the exam you have to, and then go on to what you want to do. And the kids, you got to trust kids. They are excellent self-teachers. I mean, any 5-year-old could code your website or build you an app right now. So it's not like they teach that in preschool or kindergarten, but kids adapt. They self-teach all the time. And we have to trust that they're going to do that when they want to do that. So they got their credits for high school. And then they wrote our provincial exams. They wrote 21 diploma exams and got an average of 78%. Over half of those were in the science and math, and the provincial average is 65%. So unschooling works. They got the same mark as, there you go, the number one private independent school in the province. So the beauty about this too is when kids are burning out, the burnout grade is grade 8. They're done school, they're done with learning stuff they think is irrelevant, they're done with teachers, they're done with the whole social milieu of school, and they're burning out. And they're going down grade 9, grade 10. Those are the years they need to be gearing up because they've done school. They've done 16 years of school if they were in preschool at age 2. 16 years. And now we want them to do another 4 years of university. They're burning out. Yet unschooled kids are new to school in high school and they're gearing up. These are the best years of their life because it's new to them and they're motivated and they're energetic. So maybe reconsider. Learners do not need 16 years of formal education. Absolutely not. The brain is ready. In the teen years, it works really well. Okay, at this point, do we have any questions in the chat box? Not yet. Okay, feel free to write anything you want in the chat box. I'll keep going till we have some questions. So, where are my kids now? Well, I had 4 kids accepted to universities. 3 were in STEM pathways, and so far we have 4 graduates. I have been honored to attend 4 university convocations. Did they need to learn how to go to school and how to study and how to write an essay for 12 years of education? Nope. 2 years at the most, and they got it. When the brain's ready, they get it really, really fast. And here's my gang now. We went to Walmart and got some grad pictures done. These are the university graduates. So, how was this researched? Well, there's a fair bit of research out there, but there's not a whole lot of research out there, kind of still. Peter Gray has done a lot of research, but it's not. His samples are very small. There's about he did a sample on 230 graduated unschoolers, which is really a small sample when you think about it. So I tend to look at the more wider range, the schools, the Sudbury Valley School that was founded in the 60s. There are about 280 free schools worldwide that do self-directed education. Many of them choose not to get government funding and can do what they want. And they're showing great results. Summerhill has been in existence for over 100 years. They have been threatened with shutdown from the government for not producing, and yet they do produce. So the evidence is out there in a lot of self-directed schools. It's very hard to measure unschooling progress in just unschooling families because many do not believe in test taking. I knew I wanted to write a book. I asked my kids to write the exams. They did. That to me is diploma exams are a objective way to measure homeschooling. SATs could be the same. SATs are available worldwide, so kids can write that. I was just on a webinar the other day with the University of Calgary. They accept SAT exam results too. Many of you are familiar with the Homeschooling in Canada report by the Fraser Institute. This is an old report, 2007. This one is 2015, and it shows all these benefits of homeschooling. And I hate to call it homeschooling because it has nothing to do with school. It's home education. It's so different. But these are the highlights from the report. I'm not going to read them all, but good stuff. This is why we pull our kids out of the system. Yeah, and there's lots of research in other areas that point to unschooling without specifically mentioning when kids choose their own learning, they do a lot better. So Howard Gardner's Multiple Intelligences, Dr. Reginald Bibby, Parenting Canada's Teens, great stuff in there. The EC Mapping Project, which is kind of old right now. Colby's and Dale's Model of Learning, Alfie Cohn's research on punishment and rewards. In unschooling, you don't need punishments and you don't need rewards because learning is done for its own sake, for the end goal of finding something out. And that's what's so great is teaching kids how to learn without having to bribe them or threaten them. Okay, one thing that did come out of Peter Gray's research I found fascinating was one of his studies was the least structured education children had from ages 0 to 18, the more likely they would be to go on and succeed at post-secondary schools. And that kind of speaks to when I say um, children gear up rather than burn out if they are new to formal education. And both Dr. Peter Gray, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, many of you are familiar with his work on Hold On to Your Kids, Pat Ferenga, and Sir Ken Robinson, all extol the value of play, the learning outcomes from play, which is totally child motivated. Play is unschooling, unschooling is play. Okay, now the numbers of homeschoolers in Canada have doubled since COVID. So the unschoolers must have doubled too. So there's quite a few. Pat Ferenga estimates that about 10% of home educators use the unschooling delivery method. So you're probably asking, why have I not heard of this before? Why is this not more out there? And that big green symbol is the number one reason why you don't hear much of it. It doesn't make anybody any money. Um, school is a billions dollar a year industry where everybody has a piece of the pie, but not everybody agrees that it's good for children or good for all children. And many people agree it's not set up to be good for quite a lot of children. Yet it keeps the economy running, it keeps people employed. Let's not upset that cart. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. And it doesn't mean why we should not research it. Okay, I'm not going to talk about this section. And do we have any questions yet? Oh, maybe. Okay, good. Is all play beneficial? Playing with stuffed animals, jumping on trampolines, scootering, dressing up dolls? Absolutely. If you, I actually have a blog post on my website, Unschooling to University, and it lists exactly what my kids did all day and how that related, how that you could slot that into math, English, phys ed, art, right? So playing with stuffed animals, right there, you have drama. So using an inanimate object and making voices for them, that's drama, that's theater. Jumping on trampolines, there you go, that's phys ed. And I would also say that's mathematics because we used our trampoline to skip count. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And on 3, 6, 9, we'd all land on our rear ends, right? So the kids would physically learn how to skip count. And that's the beginning of greatest common multiples, division, multiplication. Scootering, that's phys ed, that's learning road signs, that's more under life skills. Dressing up dolls, that's the precursor for parenting or working out as kids do interpersonal communication. right? You can all put anything a child plays with during a day into and slot it into um, a learning outcome. Yes, this slideshow will be available later. You betcha. If you want to get my book, Unschooling to University, if you live from Ontario to Newfoundland, if you want to e-transfer me $25 for postage, I can put it in the mail. And if you're from BC to Manitoba, it's only 20. Okay. Another question. Could you clarify how kids get credits if they want to go to university in Ontario? My kids are 7 and 9 years. So basically, all the universities across Canada only they don't want a high school diploma. They want certain subjects that are grade 12, depending on the program. So if your child's going into humanities, they might want history and English at a grade 12 level. So your child might have to take those two subjects, just grade 12. They don't have to take grade 10 and 11, but they might take those two subjects, or they might write the SAT. And that's how they can get into any university across Canada pretty well. So I'm going to show this little video, which I love. So these are brain neurons. This is a neuron here. This is an axon. And these are these little not tree things, these spiky things are called dendrites. And what happens is a neighboring neuron here sends a neural transmitter across the axon to the axon terminal right here. And there's a gap, which is called a synapse. And it sends that neurotransmitter across that gap to the neighboring neuron here to fire this one. And that's called learning. And this physical process happens whether the child is studying a math book or playing a video game. Okay. The brain does not distinguish between play learning or worksheet learning. This happens of all learnings. I'll show you. There it comes. Whoa. This is learning in the brain. Pretty cool. I love that one. Okay, so that's learning in action. And I think what else did I want to talk about? Okay, so let's talk about this slide. So this kind of tells you what kids learn without even being taught. So babies learn to crawl and walk without being taught. Toddlers learn to talk. And they only learn it not because they're doing worksheets, but because people talk and engage with them. It's experiential learning. Preschoolers, they learn toileting. School agers, they learn how to read, how to write, and how to do basic arithmetic without being taught. Just because they live in a world where people read, where there's signs, where people write, and where people need basic math in order to shop, have an allowance, figure out what things cost. In puberty, children learn how to write essays and mathematics without being taught. They are keen enough to pick up what they need to know when they need to know it. So the brain develops from the bottom to the top and from the back to the front. And babies have a very well developed cerebellum and brain stem and occipital lobe. Toddlers have a very good temporal lobe developed. Preschoolers, the parietal lobe. First graders, the frontal lobe. And in puberty, the prefrontal lobe right there. So when people say unschoolers don't learn any math, let's take math because everybody's worried about letting go of math. So unschoolers really who don't have any formal math skills are not starting to learn math in grade 9 or 8. They have experiential learning of math. They've learned math for 13 years already, but they haven't had a lot of experience learning math on paper. And that's when they can start doing it on paper at age 13, because that's when they get their abstract thinking skills. So they can learn 8 grades of math at age 13 and catch up in a year. It's amazing. I've watched it in my 5 kids. Pretty amazing. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. So this is what my kids have learned through play. All these things. I'm not going to talk about them, but all these things. For example, perimeter. They learn that when they mow the front lawn. And then they learn area when they fill in that mowing. Those kinds of things. They learn volume when they help me measure a package for the post office. They learn integers just watching the weather forecast. They learn algebra in different applications through video games too. What else did they learn? They learned all of these things too. For example, coordinates in ordered pairs. They learned it through playing Battleship. They learned angles properties by observing a sundial on our vacation. They learned degrees and temperature and time by monitoring the weather. They learned about Roman numerals through reading Asterix and Obelix books. All these things they had learned through play. Now, they didn't learn these things through play. So about age 13, 14, 15, if your child wants to go into a more math career, and by then they may want to, then they're more motivated to pick up a textbook and start reading about these things, figuring it out themselves, doing things on paper, self-teaching. And if they need help self-teaching, don't worry, my math ends at grade 8. Then there's the internet or there's tutors. So your job as facilitators to get them a tutor, maybe help them find some websites like Khan Academy to help them figure out their problems in algebra or trigonometry, those kinds of things. This was a wall display in a museum in Australia, and this blue is water. So you turn this whole thing around and you can see how the squares fill the big ones or the little ones. And it brings the Pythag to life. This is what kids learn by manipulating objects through their play. Okay, let's talk about reading. They learn to read, but we don't really teach that. And like I said, around age 13, they really start to get their abstract thinking skills and they really start to understand that. Where's my reading one? Yep. Okay, well, let's go back to the brain then. Reading is a function of the brain. So every child learns to read, whether they're in school or not. They don't need to be taught. So reading involves the occipital lobe, so sight. It involves the temporal lobe, so language recognition, and the frontal lobe, connecting symbols with sounds. Symbols, sight, and sounds. And just like toilet learning, every child learns to read at different ages. It developmentally all works together. Just like toilet learning is learning to recognize the sensations that they have to use the toilet, having the gross motor to get to the bathroom in time, and having the self-control to wait. And reading is all those parts of the brain working together, and one day it clicks. And you don't know what kids started reading at age 7 or 4 or 12. If they love reading, they don't have a phobia about reading, they are going to read for pleasure and they're going to love reading and keep on doing it. And that's going to increase their reading. That's going to increase their writing ability. Oh, we have another question. Okay. My 9-year-old unschooler and I just measured pop cans because one oddly appeared larger than the other. Yes, absolutely. You can do that. It's the curiosity, right? Yes, I remember we were measuring a cheesecake and we ordered a half a cheesecake. We didn't really get half a cheesecake from the store. And it was an exercise to learn pi, circumference and radius and diameter and all those things, which is really cool. Okay, let's see. So Unschooling is not well researched yet. Most unschoolers detest the whole idea of standardized testing, knowing and believing, as many teachers do, that testing doesn't assess the full range of capabilities. So it's largely unstudied. Unschooling is not uneducated. Children who unschool learn as much or more as children in structured learning environments, but delve deeply into subject areas. So they go deep rather than wide. And that's a good thing because in school they go wide as possible and you get to learn little tidbits about lots of things, which you can do at home through play too. But if a child wants to deeply go into physics or deeply want to go into sewing, they can. They have the time because they're not wasting time on things they don't want to learn. Will they learn everything? Everything they would possibly need, they can learn it. So, how do you unschool? It's simple. You just provide plenty of unstructured time, offer lots of things, and you don't need a house full of stuff. I mean, we had more stuff than the kids would even want to look at. We had it in case they were interested, but a lot of it I just moved out of here because it was taking up space and they weren't interested. And then the minute I gave it away, they were interested. So I had to go re-find it again. But that's normal kids, right? Your job as a parent is to be a facilitator. So there are some things they can't get, obviously. My kids wanted to learn welding. They were only 15. They weren't eligible to take it at an adult ed class. They didn't have maker fairs back then. So I had to figure out ways that they could learn welding with their age and within our budget. So they need a facilitator, they need resources, and they need free time. So what did the kids do all day? They read, they researched, they played, they gamed, chores, field trips, travel, cook, crafts, projects, volunteering, and run a small business. Lots of things to do. Yeah. Okay. Ooh, maybe another question. Okay, what age did you start to find your unschoolers started to delve deeply into one subject rather than just being interested in learning a little bit? I would say the magic ages were around 8. 8 is when they had enough staying power to concentrate. For example, sewing. They wanted to learn to sew on a machine, so I taught them. They had to have so I didn't want my machine wrecked, so I taught them how to use the machine, and they sewed and sewed and sewed for a couple months, and then that was it. Interest done, and then they move on to puppets, and they would make puppets or candle making, or that's another thing is we had an art cupboard that they had all different supplies that I bought at garage sales and just people gave me stuff, and any time they wanted to make something, they'd go, they'd have some supplies, they would just make it as long as they cleaned up the mess. And I also found around age 13 delved more deeply into abstract subjects. So I would say around 13 they quit playing with toys and crafts and things like that and did more digital exploring. So they were on screens a lot, either to post arguments on Reddit or to look up how to hack things. Those kinds of things, right? They did a lot more. My some of them would write novels, read a lot. They read a lot. Those kinds of things. So, but every child's different, right? So you don't want to very different interests, different things they want to do. Every child is so different. So there's lots of benefits of unschooling. I'm not going to really outline the 61 benefits. They're all in my book, but the advantages are here. Big one is motivation is never a problem. You do not have to fight with your kids to learn. Your child is always developmentally ready for what they're going to learn. Otherwise, they're not going to pay attention. Learning anxiety is not present because everybody's at a different level, continuum, and the child understands rather than has to memorize. They develop independence, self reliance, and responsibility. They learn how to access info. Their absorption of material is very high if they're interested in it. There's no lesson plans required, no power struggles, and a love of learning is developed for its intrinsic value. It enhances their creativity, their initiative, their decision making, and problem solving, and thus enhances their self esteem as learners. It covers all learning styles. Some kids learn through books, some kids learn through doing, some kids learn through music, through nature, through physical. It's all covered. And they're exposed to a much more diverse society than we give them. Okay, there's some disadvantages, of course. Their interests erupt at inconvenient times. So your child says to you at 9 o'clock when you're winding down from work, they want to play a board game. And that's the last thing you want to do. So you negotiate. You say, I'm really tired tonight. How about we do this first thing tomorrow morning? And it will. Cost may be a barrier. Obviously, not everyone can world school, but there's many, many ways to be cheap and frugal, and costs should not have to be a barrier. I found when my kids wanted piano and guitar lessons, that was pricey, very pricey, and after a few months, they just wanted to self teach anyways, and the motivation was there, and they've become very good piano players. The big one for you who feel you have to show accountability to supervising homeschool boards is that learning is somewhat invisible and difficult to measure, which ties into it's difficult to trust the dry spells. If your child is only playing video games for 6 months, they're not doing artwork, they're not writing, they're not sending emails, it's really hard to trust that those brains are sending neurotransmitters down those neurons. But it is happening. And just like when you plant a garden and you wait for seeds to come up, at some point in time, it's going to come up. And believe me, they will get sick of gaming after they've overdosed on it and want to do something different. We are human beings, we're social beings. Our brains are social organs. We want to connect with people, we want to do things we love to do, and very few of us just do one thing all day. Very few. So it's trusting that ability that kids are learning, even though it's invisible and it's not measurable, but they are learning and making connections in their brain. Okay, we're not going to talk about this. We could have talked about that. Maybe I'll do the myths. Okay, we got about 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes left. These are common myths. Learners need teachers more than facilitators. Nope. Learners are very good self sufficient. They need help to get things, but they can teach themselves quite fine. I have watched 3 of my kids work through Math 30, grade 12 math, on their own with just asking for help when they need it. So when they're ready, they will do it. When they're motivated, they'll do it. Children need adults to occupy their time. They're very self sufficient. They play, they will fill their time. If you train them to be entertained like they do at school, then they get used to it. And then they think, okay, it's what is that? Learned helplessness. If they are trained early that they own their time, they own themselves to entertain themselves, they will do it, especially if you don't jump in and rescue them. There are educational resources and junk resources? No. Everything's educational. Even Call of Duty is educational. Even Lego that isn't marked STEM is educational. Everything teaches everything kids learn from. Learning and socialization can only occur in school. No, Socialization occurs outside school. It can happen anywhere, anytime with anybody. And even better when there's adults around to facilitate conflict resolution. Play is frivolous and time wasting. Most of us learn through play. We love our leisure time, our hobbies. It's what we live for. Earlier formal education and more of it is good. Where there's so much research out there that says no, better late than early. Kids won't learn a work ethic if not trained early. Kids learn a work ethic when they need it. And again, on my blog, I have a topic on this is when kids need to get up for an 8 a.m. exam at university or a 7 a.m. job or they need to go somewhere, they will do it. They don't need years of practice to do that. Kids won't learn the basics. Yes, they do. They all learn the basics. Kids have too much power. And like I said, kids already own their education. It's just that we hand it over earlier to them, but they eventually act out, tune out, or drop out. They do take back their power. Okay, another question we have. Did you ever use any online resources like educational video games or suggestions? What will you recommend to answer when they ask what grade your kid is in? Well, I remember my daughter was asked what grade she was in, and she was like grade 8, but she said, "I'm uh, I'm level 8." Oh, and then she named her World of Warcraft guild or hunter, a level 8 hunter. She didn't know what grade was, so she just talked about her video game level. But and I didn't tell the kids anything about grades until high school. In high school, they could see they had workbooks that had a number on them, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and then they learned about the grading system. Until then, no, they're not graded because everybody learns differently. And I would say we didn't use the educational video games we used when the kids were young. So I'm talking 5, 6, 7. We learned what's that one? Learning something. It was Reader Rabbit and Learning Company. It was done by Microsoft. So they were discs and they were cute little things that taught them how, to sound out words and things. But for the most part, we didn't use any educational resources. The kids had free reign of the internet. They found stuff on there. Ad libs for was an example. It was kind of a game where they filled in some adjectives and then it'd create a funny story and they'd sit there and laugh at that and then the other kids would come and want to try and laugh and they found their own resources in unschooling and they shared it with siblings and they learned through it and it's not to say we didn't have a regular library night. So Monday night we all go to the library. Every child could take out 100 books and we'd bring them home and they'd toss some, but they really engage in things. And we didn't tell them what to pick. They chose, they owned it. Another question. Did you find any of your children found the transition to formal learning in the post-secondary classroom and with homework difficult? Um, that's a great question. I would say I would say for 4 of the kids, they probably had about a year experience of writing exams in high school. Um, so that transition was more harder, I would say. When they went to a classroom or when they went online, getting used to having to check in, having to ask to go to the washroom was a little hard. It took a few months of adaptation and support. I would say that from September to Christmas, I was around and I supported them. And for example, my daughter, she the academic part wasn't that bad. Yes, they needed a little more coaching on how to write an essay at high school level, but more the social things. For example, that her classroom, the grade 10 teacher gave the whole class a group punishment because two kids were acting out. And she thought this wasn't right and stood up and called him out on it in front of the classroom. So I got the phone call from the principal. Things like that, they needed coaching on of how to adapt to an institution. But, and then university was way easier. University was so much better than high school because they had, sure, they had 5 courses, which was quite a leap from going to playing to 5 courses. But they have less assignments, so they have more time to work on big weighted assignments in university, and they really like the socialization too. 3 of my kids moved out at 18 and went to res at universities in different cities, so they not only left home, but they were dealing with university too. And they did fine. It had an adjustment period like all high school kids, but yeah, everyone gets, they're not, they kids pick up on what they need. They're very good analyzing the social situation, analyzing where they may need more help. The other thing too was when my kids went to university, um, they had been online all their life. They've never handwritten. So when they got to university, most of the professors would not allow a laptop in the classroom and definitely not for exams. So they had to write exams with a pencil or pen. And they were slow, very slow. And it hurt. And they were timed. So they did lose marks on that. But like I said, when the motivation, when the need is there, they're going to learn how to write cursive. So they got out a grade 1 book and they started practicing cursive. And I have examples on the blog, Unschooling to University. Children will learn to write when they need to. And it kind of shows you how much progress they made in 3 months. So, yeah, they'll be fine. Okay, another question. Will it help to be part of any unschooling group where there's organized outings? Just kind of places that we as new parents that are about to do this do not know about. Yeah, probably a lot of the homeschooling community is on Facebook. I think group outings are fabulous if kids want to go. Oftentimes you sign up for group outings and then because the kids are like, yeah, I want to go. And then 3 weeks later, they don't want to go, which is kind of a hard thing to do. But you could just go as a family. It's up to you. You know your kids best. Some may be introverts and not want to socialize and just want to go and learn. Others may be adaptable to having more people there, and others just are dying to get out there and socialize with people. So you do what works for each child and your family and what works for you, because you absolutely know your kids best. And it doesn't it's not something I always tell parents this in parenting is don't project ahead. Don't feel you have to get kids used to things now in order for them to be accomplished in them later. Because they will surprise you. Your introvert now will be very socialized later without any input from you. And you know, it happens. Kids grow, they grow, and they learn a lot that you don't teach them. So it's okay. Okay, that's the work ethic. Where will there be gaps? Yes, but there's gaps in the school kids population too. Um, Schools can pick and choose what they teach. They can't teach about all 200 countries in the world. They have to pick a few. You can do the same. Your child's not going to learn about all 200 countries at home either. So it's better your child picks because the motivation and the absorption is better than the school picks, right? So, yes, but there's not a lot of gaps that they can't fill when they need to fill, right? You can't force a child to learn and you can't stop a child from learning. And you think now, we all had to learn how to factor polynomials. How many adults can do it now today? Not many, because it wasn't relevant. They don't care. They don't use it in their daily work. So why do we force all children to learn how to factor a polynomial? And if you think kids will not learn things if you don't present it to them, well, how many of us had formal lessons in sexuality? Really? Not many. Question. How important do you think multi-age play is? Kids are twins. We're still being super COVID safe. I don't think kids need. I don't think kids need a whole lot of other kids to play with. Sure, it's nice. I think when your kids get to teenagerhood, then most teens want more contact with peers. And you see that a lot of home education parents put their kids back into school because the kids want daily contact with kids. Before then, they don't. Their whole world is family, play, and home. And it's us who thinks that they need socialization. And it's society and media out there because guess what? That makes money too. You know, day camps, um, activities, lessons, all that pressure to put your kids in after school activities, fund an industry. It's not necessarily good for kids, nor do they need that. What they need is a relaxed day, learning, caring relationships in their family. That's all they need for healthy socialization later. We see that research in the child development field. But by teenagers, that is a developmental stage where they're moving more out in the world and do want more contact. So that's your cue to facilitate that for them. Yeah. Yeah. And they will. It's kind of funny. I asked my kids, "Oh, do you remember your best friends from age 11?" And they kind of do. But you have friends for each stage in life. So now they're friends with people at work, they're friends with people from university. They don't remember all their homeschooling friends now. They've lost touch. So, you just go through stages. It's fine. Okay, should I talk about video games? Is that a concern for anyone? Oh, we're kind of 10 minutes over. You know what? I think I will wrap it there. Okay, if we have no more questions, um, I want to thank you for coming, and I'm going to end with, can play replace school? Absolutely, it can. Absolutely. Until kids want to do a more structured high school program, they can play from grades 1 to 9 and learn most of what they need. Absolutely. Um, if Yeah, okay. So if you want to learn more about video games, I do have a really good thing on the blog. Unschooling to University has a channel with video, and there is the good news science of screen time. If you want to watch that, I do talk about the brain development and what the current research is on addictions and all that stuff. So, okay, if you want the book, you can transfer to jarnall at shaw.ca, which is right here. There. If you're BC to Manitoba, it's only $20. If you're Ontario to Newfoundland, it's 25. I don't need a password. Oh, I don't have my email address on here. Oh boy. I'll put it in the chat box. How's that? There we go. Email in the chat box. Um, are we back to screen sharing? Yeah. Okay. I want to end with this lovely poem. Play. I tried to teach my child with words. They often passed him by unheard. I tried to teach my child with books. He only gave me puzzled looks. Despairingly, I turned aside. How can I teach this child? I cried. Into my hand, he placed the key. Come, he said, and play with me. So kids love play. In fact, adults love play too. When I do conferences, if I get the adults up and doing a game, they love it. Love it. They don't want to sit and listen to you. They, they want to do things more interactive. So everybody learns through play. Pretty amazing. Okay, so yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to e-transfer me. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And we do this every month, although I think I could do it next month. Where I'm off to Spain for a few weeks, world schooling. So we will see you in a month. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.